Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Vinayo sasanasa ayutti. So, evening at Cittaviveka Buddhist Monastery. This is the period of Vasa, and if my understanding is, we've got I think about 3 weeks left of the Vasa. We had a full moon observance day on last Sunday, and then the moon will be a new moon in a week, and then next full moon is the end of the Vasa. It goes by a lunar calendar. And during this Vasa, during every Vasa in Ajahn Kaccana monasteries, and actually most monasteries, the population is stable for Vasa, so it's the same group of 21 of us, with some minor exceptions and allowances. And in Ajahn Kaccana monasteries, we take the opportunity to study the monastic Vinaya, the monastic rules during the Vasa. And this is really the only, in most Ajahn Kaccana monasteries, this is really the only sort of formal study that you do, where you take books, and there's an assignment, and we post. There's a couple people designated as the Vinaya presenters, and they assign readings and post them on the board, and then so the rest of the everybody below 10 Vasa is required to do the readings, come to the Vinaya class, and listen to and participate in this presentation. So it's a lot like school or university. And we do nothing else like this. My understanding is that there's a YouTube video about the monastery. It goes by the abbreviation of SBS in Malaysia. It's a good monastery, and we actually have Venerable Vermuttadhamaka. He's on solitary retreat night now, but he comes from that monastery. And they have, I think Ajahn Nisipo just interviewed the abbot of SBS, and he described how they have a very detailed program of they study Vinaya just like we do, but they also study many other topics, and perhaps with similar levels of intensity and scholasticism. Reflecting on that, I think Ajahn Kaccana monasteries, except for the Vinaya, we take a more Montessori approach. We assume that you'll be interested in learning these things, and we trust that monastics will pick these up as needed. And instead, the approach is providing an environment where you can develop in meditation, develop skills like broom making and other monastic crafts, although we do make you learn how to sew. And develop in studying the suttas if that's what you're interested in. Also, developing presentation skills. All these are formalized at SBS, and here they're not. But the Vinaya comes from Ajahn Chah. He had us study it, and my understanding in Ajahn Chah monasteries in Thailand, it's one person reading from the Prabhasika Wanana, which is a really old book. I think the Thai sounds stilted to Thai speakers now. And we take a more dynamic approach to the Vinaya here. But it's really good to consider, why do we do this? What's the reason behind spending this kind of effort on Vinaya? And there's no one single answer, but I thought I would reflect on a few of them. I mean, it's helpful to recognize there's different... the Vinaya can be split up. There's different kinds of rules in the Vinaya. Some of them are what you would call moral rules. We're not... Third Parajika is not to kill a human being. And I think pretty much everybody can agree with Buddhist values, can agree that's a good thing. And it's the first of the lay precepts. Similarly, there are rules in the Vinaya which correspond to the rest of the lay precepts. And these are really, it's really simple to understand why we have these precepts. It's the same as the lay people. And then there's another layer of precepts which are more renunciant precepts, similar to the 8 precepts. So just like the 8 precepts, the bhikkhus have rules against eating after noon. We've got rules against seeing shows. We can't sleep on high beds either. And sexual activity is prohibited. So the 8 precepts are in the monastic Vinaya as well. And I think again, Ajahn Kaccana has explained the significance of those repeatedly. And so, renunciation simplifies your life. And so those are... So what I'll talk about more is the rules that that go beyond the 8 precepts. And again, there's different sorts of these. Some of them are refinements of the rules of moral conduct. For example, bhikkhus have to be extra careful handling water, which even might contain living beings. The lay precept says just, I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature, and that there you have intention. So if you don't intend to kill the creatures in the water, then it's not breaking the first precept. Whereas bhikkhus, if we even think that there's creatures in the water, we have to be extra careful with that water. So some of those are refinements. Also, some refinements around speech. Others are rules which are not specifically moral precepts, like we're not allowed to damage plant life, we're not allowed to dig in the earth. And it's not that occasionally people will think that this is because, living plant, the Buddha considered plants a form of life, and it'd be better not to harm them because of that. And that's not, if you can help it, it's better not to harm plants, but, we eat either plants or meat, and plants are, you have to eat something. So just being a human being entails eating at least plants. But the Buddha wanted the monastics to not, even though those are necessary activities, farming is necessary for societies. The Buddha wanted monks and nuns to be dependent on the lay people, and so prohibited us from farming. And so that may be the import. That's one of the imports of those rules. But then there, then there's, and then there are rules which are, which made more sense then than now, or which don't even seem, necessary. You can, we're supposed, for instance, we're supposed to be with our robes, or somewhere related to our robes every dawn. And that perhaps you could argue that made more sense when they didn't have good places to keep your robes. And there's enough rules that it takes about 5 years of these classes before you're really able to fluidly live with these rules. And why all that investment? And again, not so much for the moral ones, but for the minor ones. And it's a good and a valid question. And again, there's no single answer to that question, but there are a few, perspectives to give. First is just to recognize where we're coming from. Recognize that all human beings are conditioned, and our conditioning comes from a world that is very different than the world, in some ways, the social world that the Buddha inhabited. So we're going to perceive it as strange. And that's almost inevitable. It's good to recognize where we're coming from and the limitations of that. As a as a Western society right now, we are we have a tendency to believe that the new is better than the old. We understand things better than people in the past. And we also tend to like efficiency. If I don't understand it, then, why bother doing these things? I could be doing something better with my time. And, those are, again, they're understandable. They're part of our conditioning. But it's also really good to look at the direction that the modern world is going and think, is this, are we really that wise? There was fairly recently, I read most of a book called The Master and His Emissary by Iain Gilchrist. It's a big book, and it's a formidable book. It sent me running to the dictionary several times. But he gives, I won't go into the whole book, but he gives a brilliant critique of modern Western society, which is worthy of repeated reflection. He says, "We are busy imitating machines. We're turning the world into We perceive the world as a machine. We perceive ourselves as a machine in a mechanistic world. And we try to, and the own machines are measured in very narrow terms. You can, a machine that is faster, a machine that is more accurate, and a machine which takes fewer resources to operate, that's a better machine. And that's really simple. And so if we focus on those things and particularly perceive ourselves and others in those terms, we tend to completely miss the fact that faster communication with a human being is not always better, because you're doing more than just conveying information. There's a sense that when I speak with you, there can be a sense that we are, for instance, mutually recognizing each other's worth. Machines don't need to do that. But humans, it really helps us a lot. And so, we're not machines. And it's really, really important to recognize that and to be wary of the of the conditioning in our society that says we are. And so, so this whole Buddhist practice is not a practice for machines. And there's lots of bits of the Vinaya that may not make sense from a point of view of maximal efficiency. Sometimes it might even be hard to understand why exactly they make sense. But one of the other things that human beings have that machines don't is that lineage, the sense of being something much bigger than ourselves and much older. The Buddhists, my understanding is this monastic form is one of the, perhaps either, I don't know if the Jains might be slightly older, but other than that, we're following the same rules that monks and nuns followed 2,500 years ago. And that's powerful. And even if the situation doesn't entirely match what their situation was, even if we don't entirely understand why the Buddha asked us to practice that way, when we do practice that way, it can be very powerful. We are connecting with something that is much older than modern society, and in my mind, much wiser. And so, there is another thing that modern society tends to be is we tend to be rootless. And I would say, I was born in the United States, and I moved all over the United States before finally going to Abhayagiri. I really don't have any hometown. So in that sense, I'm really rootless. But I would say that overall, Americans probably suffer from that more than the British, who have lived here a long time and who perhaps tend to move around not so much. And there's some wonderful little villages out here which haven't changed all that much in hundreds of years. The United States is very different. we walk past, oftentimes when we're in Kutis, we walk past New Bridge, which the date on New Bridge says like 1787. And that's New Bridge in England. No, that's the Old Bridge in the U.S. And like prehistoric bridge in California. So it's, yeah, very different. And this sense of lineage can provide roots. And also, it's not, and Dhamma practice can as well. The Buddha likens describes the 4 foundations of mindfulness as an ancestral territory, and that can be very powerful, because even if we've moved around all our lives, the sense of being able to be present for body and mind just as they are, that's the ancestral territory that people can't take away from you. And so there's power in that. And it's also useful to consider that these inexplicable, or at least not entirely rational, aspects of Vinaya, some of them may make more sense as a way as what's necessary to have transmitted this Dhamma over the centuries. It's hard to tell exactly. Certainly, I mean, there's many reasons for the prohibition for handling money, which is one of the major precepts. It's both for samaneras and for monks and nuns. That one seems, when you look at how rich some religious institutions have become and the results of that, you recognize, that makes sense. That also makes complete sense from just a individual point of view. When I was young, I remember thinking, I read about Jesus was actually very critical of money as well, and more so than the Buddha. Is my reading of it. So I thought I was committed I was very interested in Christianity. I thought, wow, it'd be amazing to be able to live without handling money, but I don't think I could do that. And wow, here we are, no money. It's amazing. And that, again, the gift of the Buddha and Ajahn Chah's willingness to go for it, because in his early years he handled money, and then he became increasingly uncomfortable as he read the Vinaya texts, and eventually decided, okay, I'm going to abandon this, and he did. And then we've continued that tradition, and actually, I think my understanding is that many, if not most, forest monks do the same and say the lineage of Ajahn Mun. But again, it's hard to say exactly which bits are necessary and which bits aren't, and whether bits that seem strange now may have been necessary to transmit it, to keep the Dhamma going in other times and places. Again, just the longevity is pretty amazing. It has worked, and that's sometimes. And I don't know. I don't know if the Buddha thought his teachings would actually last this long. They had some amazingly lucky breaks at times. Don't know. But Ajahn Chah gives a simile, which applies to this, where he says, suppose you go to a market and you buy some coconuts, and you're carrying them back, and you meet a friend, and he says, "Oh, what are you going to do with those coconuts?" And you say, "Well, I'm going to eat the coconuts." And he says, "Well, are you going to eat the shells?" "No, I won't eat the shells." "Well, then why'd you buy the shells? Why didn't you just buy the coconut? And why don't you just buy the part you're going to eat?" And Ajahn Chah says, "What do you say to this person? They don't understand coconuts." And so that's a sense of, that the parts, the strange parts, may be a necessary shell. Now, that's not to say that you certainly, no one says that we have to like it all. No one says that we quite have to understand it all. And certainly, when fully realized, Dhamma, when realized, completely transcends these strange bits of Vinaya. There's no doubt that these are just conventions. And, but at the same time, those who are fully realized aren't bothered either by the conventions. They're not restrictive. There's nothing immoral about these, all of these different conventions that we follow. And they also everybody doing the same thing. If you have a community with shared standards, it also produces cohesiveness among the community. Again, a simile from Ajahn Chah. He said, "Look at a millipede. It's got hundreds of legs, and you think all those legs would get tangled up in each other. But if you watch millipedes moving, they move really well. But that's because all their legs are very well coordinated. And similarly, a sangha of monks and nuns, you can be big, but if everyone follows the Vinaya, then and the principles, then there's no then they can be harmonious, just like a millipede's legs. And also reflecting on modern society. We do irony pretty well. There is a strong understanding of how human beings can attach to conventions and, either act stupidly or misbehave. And also how attaching to conventions is meaningless. That you can't find fulfillment in attaching to conventions. And you'll find, that seems to, you can find that. So, for instance, it's not, certainly, what Monty Python makes is very much appreciated in the United States as well. And, so, for instance, films like The Life of Brian, which is a parody of the life of Jesus, has some, it's good, it's good satire. Blessed are the cheesemakers, and then, what was that? Blessed are the cheesemakers, and some said, well, okay, he means the entire dairy industry. That's spot on as to how human beings, miscommunicate and misinterpret things. And another example of irony that and that I appreciate is, and also reflecting on what can last and what can't, is the Grateful Dead's last studio album was called "Built to Last," and the lyrics, the bridge of the song "Built to Last" is something like, "Built to last till time itself falls tumbling from the wall. Built to last till sunshine fades and darkness falls on all. Built to last while clouds roll by, built to last while years roll by like cloudscapes in the sky. Show me something built to last or something built to try." That's very good poetry. And the Grateful Dead's own assessment of the possibilities of that can be seen by the cover art of the album. It's the band putting together an elaborate house of cards, and titled "Built to Last." And again, recognition of irony. But I would say, the Buddha Sasana is built to last or built to try. The Buddha recognized definitely it wasn't going to last forever, but he put some good work into trying to figure out how to make it last, and both in terms of setting up the Vinaya and emphasizing the fundamentals of Dhamma practice. And so we, in a way, it's not hard for our culture to understand irony, and a bit of reflection we get impermanence. But the trouble is that irony and satire and criticism, I think it's the last song of the life of Brian, in the end, the joke's on you. Always look on the right side of life, and then, but in the end, the joke's on you. And so the Buddha's teaching is not ironic. Or at least Nibbana is the supreme noble truth. There is an understanding that although you can name it if you want, but the name is not the reality. There is something transcendent, and it to be experienced individually by the wise. It's not something that exists as a social institution. It's not an idea. It's a realization. And it's the Buddha put forth the causes for that realization. Those are his teachings. But whether anybody actually does that or not is, it's our choice. The Buddha can't do it for us, and he'll try to persuade you it's worth the effort, but it's up to us to make that decision. But even if we feel that Nibbana is not within our grasp, just the existence of something which is the supreme noble truth, that there is something that there is something sacred. There is something which is basically only someone who basically making fun of Nibbana is foolish. it doesn't work. It's not, it cheapens you. It doesn't touch Nibbana. So, and this is another thing that our culture doesn't understand. And I think that and it's helpful to point that out, because again, when we come to Buddhism, it's good to recognize, the supreme noble truth. So, and I guess, just, to close, these things are, Lumpur Sumedho will always say that, this is for reflection rather than for, rather than to say, oh, you must believe this, or you must even find this useful. This is all for reflection, and your own reflection will be, I think, more valuable than anything I can say. But these are some principles to keep in mind when understanding why we give such reverence to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, like we do in the chanting that we just did earlier this evening. So I offer these words for your reflection. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.